It's March 26th, 2023, and it's Sunday. You're listening to episode 8 of Wes and Shelley Share, Chrysanthemum. Well, Shelley, what exciting location are we in today?
Well, it's kind of a cold and rainy day here in Monroe or Matthews, wherever we are. And so we're in our living room, and we have a fire going, and it's actually quite lovely.
So we have titled this episode Chrysanthemum. We're going to talk about this book and kind of about some of the dynamics in the classroom and working with children, I guess, and adults too, but just working with people that makes us think about. And then we're not going to talk about church camps. We originally brainstormed that. We brainstormed these now on a note in Apple. So later we'll talk about that stuff. But I think we're going to talk about your book and ideas that we have for that. And then we've got, we each have our own Wonderlinks and Wanderlinks.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so Chrysanthemum by Kevin Hincke. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. The summary, according to Wikipedia, is, though this was a 1991 children's book. Do you want to talk about it before I read the summary, or am I going to read the summary first?
No, go ahead and read the summary because that'll give them a context for what we're going to talk about.
Okay. Chrysanthemum is a young mouse who loves her unique name until she is teased about it by her classmates. Her main tormentors are 3 girls named Jo, Rita, and Victoria, who ridicule her for being named after a flower and point out that her name is so long it barely fits on a name tag. Chrysanthemum expresses her sadness to her parents, who comfort her with her favorite meals and a game of Parcheesi, while her father secretly reads a book on child psychology. One day, her class gets a new music teacher named Mrs. Twinkle to help them with an upcoming musical. Chrysanthemum is assigned to be a daisy, which makes Jo, Rita, and Victoria tease her once again. Miss Twinkle confronts them and reveals that her first name, Delphinium, is also long and inspired by a flower. The 3 apologize to her, and Chrysanthemum's confidence in her name is restored. Later, Mrs. Twinkle gives birth to a daughter whom she names Chrysanthemum.
Yes.
I forgot that part. Well, how did you encounter this book, or how do you remember encountering this book? What memories do you have of this book with our own children?
I think, actually, I first started it was introduced to it as a book to read to my class. I've always loved combining picture books with lessons, classroom lessons. And I'm pretty sure that that's how I discovered. And there's also Lily and the Purple Purse. There's a lot of...
Kevin Hincke does too? Or?
Yeah, he is.
Okay.
And then there's one about Wendell, and he's shy. And anyway, it's just a really great book to introduce and talk about different...
Would that have been when you were teaching in Bozeman and Lubbock, or when?
I don't know.
So it was 1991, so that would have been... I
don't think it was necessarily...
But
I had the books already. I don't know where I first found them, but I think it was more of a classroom book that I actually had or knew about and then would read to the children.
Right.
Teaching book. I used it as a teaching book, but it's really about teaching about kindness and bullying, which are always big topics. I think it's big topics throughout raising children. You know, we've had to have a lot of talks at school in 5th grade about using kind words and I think this is how you and I started talking about this, because I think one day we were talking about just how cruel students can be to each other and how words matter. And, we get these, I didn't mean to, or I was just kidding. And,
we both had those situations happen even this year.
A lot this year.
I can think of a specific student, but he's not the only one. There's others that, I'm just kidding. Well, we're just friends and I'm joking.
Yeah.
And I am maybe I'm hypersensitive to that, but there are just so many dangers present with teasing and with humor. And I've actually encountered this...
misplaced humor.
...with adults. There's all sorts of things that happen, but I am specifically very experienced with situations where people are teasing and they're trying to use humor, but it's not received well and is perceived as inappropriate. I've actually been in situations where it's been perceived as workforce harassment.
Right.
Now, it wasn't actually
reported
and confronted in that way, but it was reported to me, I guess. And it created a hostile environment. It created an environment where someone did not feel safe. Someone did not feel like they wanted to be around that person.
Yeah.
And this was an adult. But the situation that happened, with this student this year, it was one of those things where we had an interaction about it in class in the moment. And I said, we are not going to use humor as an excuse for being ugly and for speaking in ways that cause people to feel put down or harmed. If we're going to use language to talk about other people in this room, we're going to use kind words. I can't control what you do when you're outside this room, but I will not. And as I look back on that, I don't know. I've had a lot happen this year with the passing of my mom and being emotional and things like that. So I think that probably that particular day and that time that happened, I think I might have been feeling a little bit more just sensitive about it. But it is something, this book, well, I love how Gail, one of our pastors, uses books in children's sermons and in her sermons. And books can really be a wonderful way to weave together some conversation about important values.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the book is multi-layered, too. It's like, you go to school and you're excited about learning, and she's skipping and she's excited and she wants to meet her new teacher and make new friends. And through these series of opportunities, she's
just deflated.
She's deflated and she's not excited anymore. And then she doesn't want to go to school at all. And her parents are doing everything they can within their power to, figure out and love her and celebrate and whatever. But I just got so mad. I think what the character I got so irritated with was
Chud.
The girls, but the teacher,
Mrs.
Chud never addresses the issue. She never follows up with the issue. She just, go back to your seat. It'll be okay, whatever.
Right.
And so, I mean, I feel very strongly that, teachers need to be intentional about dealing with some of this. I place a big responsibility on the teacher in this story, this particular classroom teacher, for not listening.
I wrote,
and doing
teachers
something
need
about
to be
it.
aware of student interactions and be willing to intervene. Because whether Mrs. Chud is just ignorant and doesn't know, but I think she would have to know. I mean, come on, if you're seeing students...
I do think there is, you can very much be unaware. I mean, I would say a lot of when this happens is at recess. And when you have 4 different classrooms, and it doesn't have to be a fist fight. I mean, I am very observant of my students, but there's a lot that goes on that I am never aware of.
There are so many...
If students report it to me, then I can deal with it, And I think in order for a student to feel like you are trusted, you need to build relationships with the students in your classroom, and that is a long-term thing, or they won't come and talk to you, or if they feel like you're not going to do anything about it anyway, then they don't. But I mean, I think you have to create a culture of, you need to come and talk to me about it. I will, stand up for you. I will figure out what's going on. But I think, so I do, I guess, to push back on what you were saying a little bit, yes, things can definitely happen and you not be aware of it. Yeah. But that's your fault too if you haven't created a culture where you are a trusted adult in that classroom or in that child's life.
And that's what I'm saying is, whether it's a situation you're just unaware of or is something you are aware of and you're not willing to intervene, it is messy. I mean, I have an absolutely lovely and wonderful schedule and just situation at work. We have I think it's maybe every 3 or 4 weeks. I don't think it's every 2 weeks. It's like every 3rd or 4th week. We have lunchtime duty. We've got like a 20-minute break in the morning, and then we have an hour. Actually, it's an hour and, it's about an hour and 5 minutes, I guess, for lunch and for afternoon recess. We get out at 11:50 of class, and then at 12:15, kids can go outside to the blacktop or these fields, or there's a ferry boat or whatever. There's all these different choices of where they can be. So I had the blacktop last week, and the 7th grade boys are playing basketball, and it's getting pretty intense. And at one point I had to step in and say, look, you guys have got to chill out. If you guys can't bring it down, you're going to step out. And anyway, there's, just some hotheads. But, that's not fun. That's not something you want to do. It'd be a lot better to just sit there. But this is why you're there. Mm-hmm. You are there as an adult. I mean, of course, we don't want children to be injured, but you're also there to just make sure that everything stays on the up and up. We have rules. But see, this is the thing that's interesting. There's so much latitude in terms of classroom culture and how you establish that. I think you are incredibly gifted at being able to craft classroom culture. And you do that through your class meetings, or you have historically. And I think you just really, this is something that you don't just naturally do. And I think that somebody who's a new teacher, you really need to see this modeled and experienced it. How do you think you learned to do that? And how would you describe your ideal of if you have full autonomy to be able to shape things as you want? How do you shape your classroom culture so you don't have a chrysanthemum situation?
Well, definitely with intention. One of the books I think that made the biggest is Teaching at Positive Tomorrows. Really taught me a lot. And
Which,
I
for
had
those that don't know,
autonomy.
is a school with all the kids are homeless.
Yes,
in Oklahoma City. Shelley taught there 4 years.
And we did have a lot of autonomy with our schedule. The resilient classroom. I did a lot of research into that. Morning meetings, how to run a morning meeting, how to make that a rock in your schedule. And so there we had time to build community. And I did it in a very, you could have opening circles and closing circles. And I never went to one of their workshops, the responsive classroom.
Resilient or responsive?
I think it's responsive.
Okay.
It's one of those.
I'll look it up.
I never went to one of their formal workshops, but I read a lot of their books. And I did a lot of work with morning meetings. And just my own research and reading their books. And there's a lot, several actually, that would be good. And then just creating a culture of sharing and a culture of, and it doesn't all have to be deep and dark. Tell me but I think in doing that, you build trust. And that's, one of the things I learned, especially dealing with students who are experiencing poverty and homelessness, having trust is hard, and so it was really important to do that. And so I've always done an element of that. I don't do as much of that now as I used to, except that I still believe in providing a classroom experience where students have real choices, where they feel that they are heard and that their choices matter, that we do things together. And so whereas I'm not having the morning sharing and good things and whatever, I don't ever feel like, and we've got other things that we do. We're doing the Leader in Me, which is
now in your current school.
Yes,
in 5th grade.
This is something that our school does, the Stephen Covey. And
who is the author? Because I'm not finding it under
the responsive classroom.
Yeah.
It's not an author, it's a group. They do workshops and stuff like that.
Okay.
So just Google morning meetings. It should come up.
Okay.
But I think it's just being intentional and then weaving it in with instruction. This is not just a warm and fuzzy thing, but you weave it in with instruction.
Yeah, it's responsiveclassroom.org. What is morning meeting? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, responsiveclassroom.org. Responsive. That's it.
And I learned the most from that. And I have had friends that did do that, like my friend Susan Paz, who
sharing, group activity, morning message.
Yeah.
The power of morning meeting.
Yep, it is. And my friend that I was just talking to, she's moved to Ecuador now. Susan Paz, shout out to you. But she had taken and done a lot of that. And so I learned a lot from her as well.
I'm trying to think about where I learned about class meetings.
Probably from me.
Maybe I did. I mean, I know I've learned from you with it, but I'm the original. I mean, it's just...
It's just good pedagogy.
I've done this with
I think.
college students.
Exactly.
Like, and I mean, really,
Yes.
even with my advisory, one of the frustrations, I love being an advisor. I love the fact that we have advisory. We did at Cassidy in middle school, and we do, at my current school here in Charlotte. But we really don't have much time at all, or haven't this year, just to be with our kids. And when kids and this is not just kids, this is adults of any age. One of the worst is teaching in a computer lab with a fixed desk and everyone's behind the fixed desk. When I was teaching at Wayland Baptist University in Lubbock, Texas, it was my first time I got to teach some undergraduate and also graduate courses. And I did the technology integration courses. Oh, where was that? And then that came from, Doug Simpson, who was my John Dewey and Paulo Freire professor at Tech, influenced me a lot. But at some point I was reading something from you, because that was before Positive Tomorrows. That's when we were in Lubbock. Maybe it was Jane Nelson and Positive Discipline. I think that's where it came from.
Maybe,
yeah. And so, anyway, I would ask for another classroom that was just a regular classroom, not the lab. And then we could just put the chairs in a circle. Literally just getting in a circle around it with each other and facing each other. And then sometimes you go around. Oh, that's right. Because then we would do compliments. So you'd start with a compliment, and then sometimes you'd popcorn, and sometimes you just go right around. But I know with a responsive classroom, you've got the morning greeting, and you change that and what you say. So there's different ways of doing that. But
well, and I do an element of it now. I mean, it's not that, but even at the end of the day, asking questions. And the other day, it was interesting. I was doing my exit question, the kids going out in the hall, and I said, what was the most challenging thing for you today? Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of what their exit ticket as they leave to go get on the bus. And so my principal was walking by the door, and I saw him kind of noticing. But later when he came in to talk to me about, he had been in my classroom, and he said, what was that thing you were doing? I said, that's just part of how I build culture with my kids is, I have a question for them, and every day it's something different. And sometimes it's about something, a nugget during the day or something that they remember. But
yes,
I mean, that day I felt like it had been a challenging day for all of us, but I didn't want to pick on that. But, one thing that was challenging for them today. Anyway, it's just building classroom culture, building classroom community, letting them know and find their voice, and have a voice in their classroom. And so anyway, going back to Chrysanthemum, Mrs. Chudd did not do a good job of listening to her students and addressing the issues that were surrounding them. But Mrs. Twinkle did. And Mrs. Twinkle cared about the kids, and the students loved her. And so Mrs. Twinkle, in her way, without getting on and whatever to these students, but, my name's Delphinium. And anyway, but addressed it with the girls, and to the point where, she did. And so
she modeled kindness. She modeled kindness, respect.
She modeled expectations in her classroom. So, and I think it's important as teachers to be aware, and as parents, because this is a book that we have always in our classroom insisted that our children be kind to each other.
Right.
And we didn't tolerate meanness, and we didn't tolerate this, they're going to be fussing, they're siblings. No, absolutely not. Building a culture of kindness in our own family. We don't treat people that way, and I think that's important.
Okay, look, I want to talk more about that family part. Maybe we'll talk about your book even later. But we got to take a break. We've been talking for 19 minutes.
Okay.
It's break time. This episode of Wes and Shelley Shares is brought to you by Cook with Wes. Cook with Wes is my, Wes Fryer's, personal passion project, sharing lots of food photos, a few recipe videos, lots of barbecue and smoked meat adventures, and many other recipes from my indoor and outdoor kitchens. You can find all our family recipes on food.wesfryer.com and follow Cook with Wes on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter. If you're on Mastodon, and really, why not? Since Twitter has become a bit of a dumpster fire, you can search for the hashtag CookWithWes to find my latest food shares there. Well, I did start a separate YouTube channel for Cook with Wes, but I've continued to post most of my cooking videos on YouTube on my main channel. You can access the complete playlist at wfryer.me/cook. Thanks for tuning in to Wes and Shelley Shares. I hope to see you on social media on one of the channels for Cook with Wes. Okay, we're back for the second half. I want to do a shout out to another book which ties to Jane Nelson, Positive Discipline in the Classroom. And this is how I learned about Jane Nelson. She co-authored a book that my mother shared with me. The book was with Stephen Glenn, and it's called Raising Self-Reliant Children in a Self-Indulgent World. Stephen Glenn was one of the authors that my mother studied and heard from. I think she maybe directly heard from him when she was part of the school team training initiative that was at Manhattan High School in Kansas in the mid 1980s. And part of what that was aspiring to do was to build school culture that would be proactive in helping address and prevent students from engaging in self-destructive behavior, which could take a lot of different forms. And so anyway, resilience, positive discipline, classroom community came into that, school psychology, there's a whole lot, but that had an influence on me early on in life, and then I became a teacher, and I think those are great resources. And what I'd like to do now is kind of shift it. You already did a little bit to talk about the family. So we were talking about this, I don't know, yesterday or what? I think it was yesterday. Like there's some tension between the authority and authoritarianism that you have as a parent and a teacher, and then your desire to not beat your children and be a tyrant and cause them to rebel. And, I am the classroom teacher. So in the situation where we have something going on, I will bring out my authoritarian card and say, we will not do that in this classroom. That's very much an assertion of, I am in charge and I am going to tell you what to do. But, with parenting and with teaching too, there's a fine line to walk in there, because you want to honestly empower your children, your students, and, in order to build a culture and a climate where people are sharing and willing to be vulnerable, like you can't just do that by bossing kids around or bossing your
I think there are boundaries. There are boundaries within a classroom. And if we go back to let's just go back to the kindness. There are boundaries that you just should not cross. Mm-hmm. There are boundaries that you do have to set up. We will not have that kind of language, or we will not have that kind of in this classroom, and that's just a boundary, and I think students and children need boundaries, and they need clear boundaries. It's not, it's this gray area that, no, it's like students need to learn there are certain words you don't say. Maybe you can say those at home, but we're not going to say that in the classroom. Well, it's where the
world can try to come in, whether it's popular culture, music.
It came out the other day with a YouTuber that my students, I just heard it. They weren't watching it, but I heard his name come up, and I was like, nope, absolutely not. I said, I don't do this very often, but that is a boundary. We will not, listen to this, because I knew, because you and I had discussed, I don't even want to mention this name, but that there are just some things that are not appropriate.
Yeah.
And so
the unfortunate thing in that context is if you say it out loud,
then everybody's going to go look for it.
Then every amp flies it. Oh, here, let me go Google that. What was that? How do you spell that?
So I think, but I do think our role as parents and as teachers is to set clear boundaries of, I do think it's important to listen and give some leeway in order for students to make choices. But if you can't make a good choice, if you're crossing a boundary, then I need to gear you back to the right,
Right.
And so, there are just certain things that need to be made very clear.
So how does that look in the family? How did that look with our kids? How do you remember?
Well,
I remember reading Chrysanthemum for sure to the kids. How do you remember walking that line and setting up those expectations?
We did not tolerate our children being ugly to each other, saying mean things, or Oh, and I know that the kids, if they listen to this, they'll remember this. But there was one of the very few times that I think I ever had to raise my voice at Alexander or, have any type of consequences. But is one time he was being mean to Sarah and kind of blocking her in a closet, and not letting her out. Yeah, it was in the pantry, but blocking her in there, not letting her out. And I am not going to tolerate you being mean to others in that way. It was just, whether it was with our words or actions, I think it was. Yeah. It just was.
But sometimes with, and this can be with your family or it's with the classroom, how do you set boundaries and establish boundaries? Well, it's sometimes through
consequences.
It's through enforcing boundaries.
That's right.
It's once the boundary has been crossed, what do you do and how do you handle that? And sometimes that is something that's visible. It is really great to praise in public and to criticize or punish privately, and hopefully you don't have to punish, but administer consequences. A lot of times those are private, but not always. And sometimes, especially if something's been egregious or it's happened in the whole class, like nipping it in the bud, no, we are not going to do that. You need to go over here, or, you do something, and then you can talk about it later privately. But sometimes the intervention in the classroom has to be publicly, and I think in the family it can be too.
Yeah.
Boy, margin plays into that, doesn't it?
It does.
How does it play into that, you think? I'm thinking that just, man,
I am less
really
tolerant
stressed
of things at the end of the day than I am at the beginning of the day. I do know that. And if I am really tired, then, as a working mom, it was really hard to have a long work day and then come home and be a parent. And I know as a child of teachers, I faced that. And as a teacher and having my own children, I faced that. And sometimes, that's some of the challenges of being a teacher, is being a parent and a teacher, and I think we have pretty compatible parenting styles, and I'm sure that's evolved over time. You want to talk about that? Because how important is that to have similar philosophies of parenting with your spouse? I mean, I think having similar, definitely. I don't know that that's something we sat down and discussed, or even, I
think we're very blessed that we
I think we're very blessed. And I know that we don't always 100% agree. And sometimes, we tag team parenting, but we're always in conversation with each other.
Well, we always wanted to never be played against one another. Like if you didn't allow this or I did or something like that.
Or if I felt like in the moment, that I didn't agree with something, I wouldn't necessarily address it in front of that time.
You're not a confrontational person.
No, but like I do think going back in later and saying, hey, you need to maybe go back in and think about, let's talk about that. And I think it is good that we had similar expectations of our children.
Well, and I just think that it's super important. The degree to which you can discern. One of the ways that you figure things out is you go spend time with someone that you're very interested in.
Well, it's hard when
hang
you're
out
dating.
With their family.
It's hard when you're dating to talk about kids and how would you do this?
But this is what I'm saying is you go
proximity.
See how their family is.
Absolutely. How do they treat each other?
How does their
Somebody always said that you see how that man, that boy, whatever, treats his mother. How do they treat their mother? You
learn a lot through those kinds of interactions, right? And it's not to say that, look, nobody has a perfect family. No. And tons of people, families are in all shapes and sizes. And so I'm not wanting to say anything like, oh, this is what it has to be. We're learning this at church with proximity, right? Mm-hmm. You have to have proximity in order to build relationship, in order to get to know, in order to understand. And we're talking about this in the context at church of poverty and homelessness. But when it comes to just trying to get to know someone, and especially when you're thinking about, is this somebody that I want to maybe spend the rest of my life with, be committed to, I think that it's very important to spend time with their family. And I think it's not only important to see them with you spend time with their family, it's important for you to see them with your family.
Right. And the natural, I think it needs to go both ways. Somebody had once told me to date somebody through all 4 seasons, to take that time to really, to see. And I do think that is hugely important, because you don't marry just a person, you marry their family too. And
you marry all of the baggage that you marry their debt, you marry the trauma that they've had, you marry everything, and so you want to try, I think, to have pretty open eyes, with what you're getting yourself into, and be sure you're ready for that, and that they're ready for you, right? Because if you can't be completely yourself and transparent, then somebody may be getting into something that they don't, I don't know, that they're not ready for.
That you can't get out of.
Right.
Too.
Well, or
not easily.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, that was great. That was a good discussion of Chrysanthemum. We won't go into it into detail, but let's just briefly say, what's inspiring you to think about writing a book? I think her name is
Nicole Stott. Nicole Stott wrote a book. And she's an astronaut, and things that she experienced as an astronaut. I don't know. What's the title of the book? Do you have it there?
I'll Google it.
Yeah, but about being an astronaut and seeing, she talks in the introduction. I've just read the introduction. I haven't read the whole book.
I'm going to get it for you on Audible.
But it's called, what is it called? The Earth Effect?
Well, the overview effect.
The overview effect, that's right. So many astronauts talk about that picture that was taken of seeing the Earth from space.
What life in space taught me about our home planet and our mission to protect it.
So at one point, I was listening to a podcast where she was being interviewed, and I thought, you know what? I should write a book about what being a teacher has taught me about school.
About learning, about life.
About learning and about life. And so anyway, Wes is always talking about writing books, and I never had talked about writing books, but when I mentioned about writing a book, of course, he got all excited about writing a book. So, I don't know. It's just something that I'm tossing around, because as I was reflecting, when I first started teaching, it was before computers. It was before the internet. It was
before cell phones.
Before phones.
Remember the first cell phone? Ooh, we should
it was just, there was, things were different. And I don't know, I think there's a lot of opportunities now, and good, bad, or ugly, But I think I've taught, I feel like in 2 different worlds, and in many different worlds. I've taught, a lot of teachers don't teach at many different schools. I mean, they stay in one district, and and I have taught in Germany, and I've taught homeless students, and I've taught very wealthy students, and I've
taught in Lubbock, Texas.
I've
taught in Oklahoma.
You've taught I've moved 1,000 miles away. So I think throughout my teaching career, I've taught in a lot of different situations, and I've learned a lot of things, and I think it's just really unique perspectives that I have. And both of my parents were teachers, and so I had their perspectives.
You have
my
a legacy
sister,
of great teaching in your family.
Yeah, there's a lot of legacy. And so I just thought, I don't know, maybe it's just a legacy to a memoir, but...
Yeah. Well, we see things, especially in public education. For me, it'd be like
reflective.
Right. But we see things that are not as they should be. And so you want to reflect on things as you've seen them and experienced them,
but I don't
want they can be.
I don't want it to be a book of, back in the good old days, because it's not that either. There were some things that weren't so great.
Absolutely.
And so
it's about the school that you love, though. That's what
it is. That's the name of my book, The School That I Love.
Right.
And partly it's bits and pieces of a lot of the different places that I've taught. As no situation is ever perfect, and so. But I just doing some reflecting on that. Yep. So anyway.
Awesome. All right. We'll talk more about that later. We're starting to brainstorm it out. Hey, have a place to put ideas. Trusted place you can put them. For me, it used to be Evernote, and now it's Apple Notes that sync to iCloud. It's time for Wonderlinks and Wanderlinks. We should do like a little interlude song, but I'm not going to do that. Well, actually, we should. Nope, I'm going to do it.
Not right now.
It's time for Wonderlinks and Wanderlinks. All right, Shelley, what's your Wonderlink this week?
My Wonderlink is a podcast that I've been listening to. It's called The Last Soviet. So, I think I've done this Wonderlink before. It's a space podcast that I love listening to called Are We There Yet? And he interviewed Lance Bass. And talked
Who was
to him,
a singer for
NSYNC boy band. But so interesting. So he is now, Lance Bass, hosting a podcast called The Last Soviet. And it starts out by the history of the Russian space program, which was secret for so long, and then some interesting Soviet cosmonauts. And it's just been fascinating. There are a lot of history that I didn't know. And the one I'm listening to right now is, it's like episode 3, and it is called, I don't know what it is, but No Experience Necessary. So Lance Bass, yes, was in NSYNC, and so MTV paid his way through some kind of whatever to go and be trained as a cosmonaut. Now, he had a history in science and a history of wanting to be an astronaut, and I mean, he had a lot of scientific, background in addition to being a boy band. But anyway, and so this is the one I'm listening to right now is about a British woman who also went and trained to be a cosmonaut. And man, talk about a grueling training. And as I think about my daughter who's getting ready, who would like to be an astronaut and go through this, I'm like, oh my word. But anyway, and also being Women's History Month, I've been listening to the history of women in our space program. Again, I've lived through some very unique times, about, Nicole Stott. She was a woman astronaut at a time where very few women were being allowed to even do that. I mean, it was such a new program.
You've been really struck lately about just how recently women have been permitted
inequities.
To do a lot of things.
And I guess I just never really thought about the inequities that women have had, especially in sciences, and especially in math, especially, and it's just in very recent years, in the last 50 years that women have been, encouraged to go into. Anyway, so there's a whole other thing. But this podcast is absolutely fascinating. They're each about 40 minutes long. Great, very detailed history, very well done. Definitely for everyday people. But I love it because it's historical. I love it because it does a deep dive into the psyche of the Russian programs, which, by the way, is why we are so, there was that space race in the very beginning between Russia and the United States getting into space. And so a lot of experience there. Anyway, it's just, I would highly recommend this if you're into space.
Okay. Mine is related, and it's a documentary series. Excuse me. It's a BBC documentary series by Adam Curtis, and it's called Trauma Zone. It's about Russia from 1985 to 1999, and I'll include this Guardian article that tells a lot about it, but basically he got access to, he's a filmmaker for the BBC, he got access to something like 60,000 hours of video, or tens of thousands of hours, and I've only watched the first episode, but there's not commentary on top of it, as there often is in a documentary. It really just shows life in the Soviet Union leading up to the fall and then at the fall. And one of the reasons I think we need to be studying this and learning about this is Russia today is not perceptually the Russia pre-Ukraine war invasion.
Right.
When Putin decided to invade Ukraine, he showed the world who he is. And unfortunately put our nations on a collision course for war. And while I've heard some good commentators talk about how this isn't a proxy war between the United States and Russia, I mean, it is truly an existential fight for Ukraine's survival. because if Russia wins, Ukraine ceases to exist as an independent nation. And so, anyway, there's just a lot of layers to this, but it's crazy to realize that we have this incredibly brutal and horrific war that's in its second year. And while historically, and, Shelley enjoys the space program and all these aspects, that will affect our daughter. The war right now in the Ukraine is going to affect, I think, the cessation of, at some point, not in the not too distant future, most likely the collaboration between Russia and the United States, unless there's some seismic political change where Putin and that anti-Western administration, unless that changes. Okay, it's a little bit of a downer there, but hey, those are good links. Let's talk about Wander links. What's your Wander link?
This is awesome. So I got to go. I had a friend from school invite me for breakfast, and so a couple friends. And they're two of our DLI teachers, dual language. Immersion language. Yeah, immersion class at school. So Liana and Delgado, and then Daniela Duarte. Anyway, and Daniela is from Colombia, and so they invited me to a Colombian restaurant, and we had a Colombian breakfast, and it was just... oh, man, it was just amazing. And I kind of got teary because they were the first people that actually invited me to go out and do something, just
since we've lived here.
Yeah, since we've lived here. I've made arrangements to go, and I've had, things. But you know what? It was really nice for somebody to just say, hey, let's go to breakfast, And,
the restaurant's called Las Americas Panadera Colombiana. And the website is ColombianRestaurantLasAmericas.com. I'll include that in the show notes.
And it was so good because I learned a little bit about Colombian culture and bread. Bread is really important, and they're really specific about their bread. And I got to try some traditional Colombian bread. It's kind of a fry bread. It wasn't sweet, but boy, I haven't had bread in a long time because it was kind of off my program. But, it was so good, and it was so lovely to get to visit and just hear about their experiences. She's taking a job in Denver, Colorado, and we'll be moving out. And Daniela,
didn't you help her get connected
this is her
with that
first year.
Carney?
I don't remember if maybe. But anyway, so it's really nice. It was wonderful, and so that was kind of my wander. I got to wander and find a new restaurant and have a lovely breakfast with friends.
And you're going to take me there sometime.
It's an IANA.
Okay, well, we'll do that in a minute.
Yeah.
All right, and mine is Wednesday we went to the John G's food truck in Monroe. Monroe is the town where Shelley teaches, and John G's is the most amazing barbecue we found in North Carolina. They're out in Peachland, and you can only go to their physical location on Saturday. But their food truck goes around. They're really hard to book and schedule. And lo and behold, the actual owner of John G's.
Oh, Wes was so starstruck. Here comes this guy, and he says, hey, aren't you Cook with Wes? And Wes is like, well, yeah, how do you know that? Anyway, and he introduced himself, and it was Mr. John G. himself, recognizing Wes.
I had made a video about their place and their barbecue when we went out there last summer for my birthday, and he wasn't there. They had a wedding or something, and so anyway, we got to visit and learn about his background and his backstory, and I got a picture. I'll put a link to the picture in there. It was really cool. I love barbecue. Okay, Shelley, how can people connect with you if they want to interact with you digitally?
Oh, you always ask me this question, and I never know. You can follow me on Facebook. That's where I spend a lot of my time now. I'm not so much into Twitter anymore, but I am at S. Fryer on Twitter and Shelley Fryer on Facebook. But I also have a blog where I think Wes is posting all of these, and it's shelleyfryer.com is my website, /something. So
shelleyfryer.com/podcast.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And I'm Wes Fryer. I'm W. Fryer on Twitter. I'm not leaving Twitter, although I've thought about it. I'm on Mastodon. I cross-post to both. But you can and I'm on Facebook, of course. So you can go to wesfryer.com/after. So until next time, we encourage you to stay curious, go outside,
and have adventures.
There you go. Have a great week.
Wes and Shelley Share is a weekly podcast recorded and published on Sundays by Wesley and Shelley Fryer of Matthews, North Carolina. Learn more and find links to connect on social media to Wes and Shelley by visiting shelleyfryer.com/podcast. Content on this podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Only 3.0 license. The Wes and Shelley Share podcast is recorded and published with Anchor and distributed on all major podcast channels, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and more. Please share our show on social media and tell others about us. Let us know on Facebook or via other means what you like about the show, that you're listening, and if you have any suggestions for future episodes. Stay curious, go outside, and keep exploring.